who wondered about the role of the papacy and the concordat between the Vatican and Germany that had granted freedom to Roman Catholics in Germany, but for the eyes of many in the world, it had done much to legitimate the new world of the Nazi government. I'm going to skip a number of things. It wasn't until the 1960s that the matter of Jewish-Christian relations was officially addressed by the Catholic and Protestant Orthodox worlds. This happened first at the Second Vatican Council, which was mentioned in our last session, 1962 to 65, of the Roman Catholic Church. It began with this document, Nostra Aetate, the Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian religions. It opens, in our time, when every day men are being drawn closer together and the ties between various peoples are being multiplied, the Church is giving deeper study in her relationship with non-Christian religions. And as Professor Baum mentioned earlier, he was involved in the drafting of these documents. It continues, all peoples comprise a single community and have a single origin, since God made the whole race of men dwell over the face of the earth. It mentions Hinduism, where human beings contemplate the divine mystery, and Buddhism. It looks with esteem on Muslims, for they adore one God, maker of heaven and earth. And it concludes this section by saying, the Catholic Church rejects nothing which is true and holy in these religions. It looks with sincere respect upon those ways of conduct and life and calls for dialogue and collaboration. It had originally been intended to address the question of the Jews. It did also address that, and it rejected all anti-Semitism within the Christian traditions. This event was of immense importance within the Christian world, the Catholic world, because the key thing that it said, what should be our relationships with peoples of the other faiths? Dialogue and collaboration, okay? Not just talking, but working together. That was an event of immense significance. And 3 years later, the World Council of Churches, meeting in Uppsala, Sweden, announced it was establishing a unit on dialogue with living faiths and ideologies. So, between these two events, you really had covered nearly 80% of the Christian world that had publicly committed itself to dialogue and collaboration with people of other faiths. In 2000, in Turkey, was initiated by the Journalists and Writers Foundation, part of the Gulen movement. It was held in Sanliurfa, Haran, and Istanbul, and it brought together Jewish, Christian, and Muslim religious leaders and scholars from around the world. It was a remarkable, remarkable event. But this was a late development in the story that surrounds Gulen, who came from Eastern Turkey and was the son of a local government official. He was educated at home and in the local madrasa, but even as a young boy, he often chafed to know more about what was happening in the wider world and the world beyond the traditional Islamic sciences. When he was only 19, he was licensed to preach in Western Turkey. In his early 20s, he was an official imam of the Department of Religious Affairs, and it was in the mosque and its oral culture that he was nurtured and shaped and began to have an influence much beyond the immediate mosque in which he was sort of speaking and preaching. He was a gifted and fervent preacher. He urged his people to take up their responsibilities as Muslims for the wider society and the world. He began to focus much of his attention on schools. Rather than building mosques and establishing Quran courses, he began to recommend building schools based on modern science and morality. Initially a follower of Said Nursi, he went his own way in the 70s. In 76, he established a boarding center that accepted and supported bright students who didn't have the necessary finances to pursue higher education. While attending government schools, they also had educational programs in the Bozaka. His popularity as a preacher in the mosque had continually grown, and now he began to publish books like his 2 volumes on the Prophet Muhammad, entitled, and I think that's a lovely title, The Infinite Light, and popular works like Questions This Modern Age Puts to Islam. I know my time's up, and I was going to go through all these other things that he's done, and let me just conclude with a almost final sentence. All these activities that I went through, things that other people have mentioned here, have generated a certain amount of controversy. Some conservative Muslim opponents criticize his openness towards modern science and other religions, while other Turkish secularists criticize his adherence to traditional values in Islam. The political right finds him too liberal, the left finds him too conservative. Others see the Gulen movement as a potential political threat, while still others criticize them for being apolitical. And so it goes. I think an open investigation of the Gulen movement would lead us to see that it is a movement that seeks through dialogue, education, and the media to contribute to the common good of humanity. That it sometimes fails is to be expected, but that it also sometimes succeeds is remarkable. And as Gulen has remarked, the most blessed of all people is the one who benefits other people. Surely this is something to applaud. The post-World War II way of dialogue is a crucial development of immense importance for today and tomorrow. It inaugurates something new in the history of relations between peoples of diverse religious communities. But one of the great dangers to the movement is the tendency among the opponents of the way of dialogue to politicize every act of dialogue, to turn it into an act either for or against someone's political agenda. But the way of dialogue seeks to move beyond the political divisions of our time. The way of dialogue is still in its early stages, and the Gulen movement deserves to be seen as an important voice in this global movement. Thank you very much.